If you've ever wondered what happens when the galaxy's deadliest predator meets the one species stubborn enough to call it a pet, then you're in for a ride. Stick around because this story will change how you see humans in the stars. Don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment with what you'd name this predator if it were yours, and of course subscribe so you never miss the next HFY tale. Now let's begin. The chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with fear. Voices rose in sharp, clicking cadences, others in low rumbles, others still in vibrating tones that resonated through the curved walls of polished alloy. Dozens of species had gathered, each represented by their elder, their scholar, their general. But they all had one thing in common: dread of the creature projected above them. The hologram spun slowly in the air, larger than life. A quadruped of impossible bulk, its black hide ridged with quills, eyes glowing faintly blue as though carrying storms inside. A maw of teeth curved inward like knives designed to trap and tear. It prowled in the recording, pausing only to shriek, a sound so raw even the recording made hardened warlords flinch. The alien delegation from the Overii trembled visibly, their feathered crests shivering in remembered terror. "This," intoned Counselor Varel, a scaled being whose voice cracked like brittle stone, "is the apex predator of planet designation K-47. It does not negotiate. It does not yield. Every attempt at capture has ended in slaughter." He let the silence hang, letting the gathered feel its weight. "We decree it untamable. Destruction is the only solution." Approval rippled across the chamber. But there were whispers too, whispers that not even their most advanced weaponry had brought the predator down. Entire hunter squads had vanished without trace. Far from the council chamber, on the edge of the very world in question, a different story had already begun. Daniel Kane's boots crunched against shattered shale as he staggered from the wreck of his scout ship. Smoke coiled into the green sky, marking his descent like a beacon. His ribs ached, a bruise spread across his jaw, but he was alive. His gear pack was half intact, his rifle bent useless, his comms sputtering static. The frontier had chewed on him before, jungles that tried to poison him, deserts that tried to bake him, but this was different. This was K-47, the planet whispered about in hushed tones in outposts and barracks. The home of the beast no one could tame. He tugged his knife from his belt and checked the pack again. A few ration bars. A field torch. Medkit half crushed. Not much but enough to try. He set his jaw and looked at the treeline ahead. The forest there wasn't quiet, it was suffocating. Layers of foliage rustled with unseen life, distant cries echoed like broken instruments. Something watched him already, he felt it in the crawl of his skin. Kane had felt that once before in Afghanistan, when the night went silent before an ambush. The same tension, the same unseen weight pressing on the back of his neck. He moved carefully, checking his steps, conserving breath. The forest floor gave way to thick roots slick with moss, and as he stepped between them he saw it. At first, only the glow, two faint pinpricks of electric blue between the trunks. Then the shape took form, immense and patient, a shadow larger than any predator had a right to be. It didn't lunge. It didn't roar. It only watched, muscles coiled under that armored hide. Kane's pulse jumped, but he forced his breathing steady. He'd read the council briefings. The apex predator didn't hesitate. It tore and shredded everything in its path. Yet this one waited. "Figures," Kane muttered, half to himself, voice low. "Of all the planets to crash on." He raised his hands slowly, showing the knife, then lowered it to the ground. No sudden movements. Back on Earth, wolves respected posture. Bears tested your fear. Even the smallest honey badger wouldn't turn its back on you if you showed weakness. He wasn't about to show weakness now. The predator's head tilted, spines along its back twitching. Its nostrils flared, tasting his scent. Kane crouched, sliding a ration bar from his pack, peeling it open with deliberate slowness. The smell of synthetic protein drifted in the damp air. He placed it on the moss between them, then leaned back. "Not much of a feast," he murmured. "But it's yours." The silence stretched. Then the creature moved. Each step was soundless, calculated. Its maw opened and those horrific teeth snapped the ration bar in two. Chewed. Swallowed. Its gaze returned to him, unreadable, electric storms still glowing behind its eyes. Kane exhaled just once and didn't break eye contact. Somewhere, unseen in the canopy, a council drone whirred softly, recording every second. It streamed the encounter across half the galaxy, back into the very chamber where the decree had just been made. Elders leaned forward, pupils dilated, antennae trembling. No one breathed as the impossible happened. The beast did not kill. On the ground below, Kane remained still. The predator shifted closer, then stopped only a few meters away. It lowered itself, not fully, but enough to suggest it was no longer on the brink of attack. Its breath was hot, carrying the scent of iron and earth. "Guess you're not all teeth and legend," Kane said softly. "Guess you just wanted someone to look you in the eye." He didn't reach for his knife. He didn't move to run. He just sat, sharing space with the monster declared untamable. Above, the drone's lens caught the image and transmitted it. A lone human and the galaxy's deadliest predator, sharing silence instead of violence. The council chamber erupted in a chorus of disbelief, arguments spilling over each other. But on K-47 none of that mattered. The predator shifted again, curling its body just slightly, not unlike a great beast settling for rest. And Kane, sore and battered, leaned back against a root and allowed himself a small, incredulous smile. He'd survived the crash. He'd survived first contact. And for reasons he didn't yet understand, the most feared creature in the known galaxy had chosen not to end him. The storm eyes blinked once, slow. Kane let his own eyes close for a moment, feeling exhaustion pull at him, but not before whispering under his breath. "Maybe you're not untamable after all." The predator's breath rumbled, not quite a growl, not quite anything else. And in that strange, uneasy truce, the night deepened. The council believed the story had ended. But for Kane, and for the predator that now lingered like a shadow at his side, it had only just begun. Dawn came reluctantly to K-47. The light that broke through the canopy was green-tinged, filtered through leaves thick as armor. Mist clung to the forest floor, turning every shadow into a threat. Kane stirred against the root where he had drifted into uneasy sleep, his body stiff, his mind wary. He opened his eyes, expecting empty silence, but the storm-glow gaze was still there. The predator hadn't moved far, still coiled a few meters away watching him. Kane sat up slowly, stretching his bruised ribs. "Still here," he muttered, half a greeting, half a warning to himself not to forget the danger. The beast didn't react, but its spines twitched once, like grass stirred by wind. His stomach reminded him of hunger. He reached for another ration bar, pausing before opening it. The predator's nostrils flared again, as if it remembered the taste of yesterday's offering. Kane smirked faintly. "Guess I'm feeding you now." He tore the wrapper, broke off a piece and set it on the moss. The beast advanced with that same silent deliberation, jaws snapping the food up without haste. It chewed, swallowed, then lowered its head to study him again. Kane chewed the other half for himself, never breaking eye contact. "On Earth, you didn't turn your back on something this dangerous." He chewed slowly, measured, showing no panic. The bond, if that's what it was, deepened by increments. The predator shadowed him as he began moving from the crash site, its movements uncanny, more ghost than animal despite its size. Kane tested the space between them, walking faster, slowing, circling trees. Always, the storm eyes followed, never letting him leave its range. He spoke as he moved, a steady stream of low words, more for himself than the creature. "You don't like sudden moves, huh? Fine. Neither do I. You keep following and we'll figure this out." The forest tested them both. Chittering insects swarmed in clouds, sharp enough to pierce flesh. Kane lit his field torch, the flame sputter keeping them at bay. The predator snarled once and the insects fled entirely. Kane chuckled. Better than bug spray. Hours stretched. Hunger gnawed deeper, and water became the greater concern. Kane followed the sound of trickling, moving toward a stream that cut through the jungle. He knelt, filling his canteen with a filter straw. As he drank, the predator crouched beside him, massive head lowering to lap the water directly. The earth shook with each gulp. Kane leaned back, eyeing it. "You don't need me, do you? You're humoring me." But then the forest changed. The normal chorus of distant cries cut short, leaving silence too sharp to ignore. Kane stiffened. He recognized it immediately. Predators weren't the only hunters here. His knife was in his hand before the first figure broke from the treeline. 3 of them, thin and wiry, scales glistening, rifles slung across their backs. Not council soldiers, poachers. He recognized the insignia painted crudely on their chest plates. The red spines, mercenaries who trafficked in live captures and trophies. Kane's gut tightened. They weren't here for him. They were here for the legend. One hissed a command, raising a shock net launcher. The weapon hummed with energy, ready to throw a web strong enough to trap a hovercraft. The predator rose instantly, spines rattling, mouth parting in a soundless snarl. "Wait," Kane hissed, stepping forward before he even thought about it. He raised his hands, knife down, posture steady. Don't do this. You'll regret it. The poachers laughed, the sound sharp and derisive. Human thinks he owns it, one mocked and accented basic. Watch him beg when it's caught. They fired. The net arced toward the predator, humming with energy, but the beast moved with impossible speed. One swipe of a claw shredded the web like paper, sparks cascading into the moss. Then it leapt. What followed was less a fight and more a massacre. The predator struck with precision, faster than Kane thought its bulk allowed. The first poacher vanished in a spray of dirt and crushed armor. The second tried to run, only to be dragged screaming into the undergrowth. The third froze, weapon trembling. The predator loomed over him, maw open wide, ready to bite down. Stop. Kane's voice cut sharp through the chaos. His hand shot up, palm open. Enough. The predator froze. Its storm eyes flicked to him, waiting. For a heartbeat, Kane thought it would ignore him and finish the kill anyway. But then slowly it stepped back, spines lowering, jaws closing. The surviving poacher stumbled, scrambling to his feet. He bolted into the forest without looking back. Kane let him go. Breathing hard, Kane turned toward the beast. It stood still, chest heaving, gaze locked on him. Its restraint hadn't been instinct. It had been a choice, one made because he commanded it. Kane swallowed, the reality sinking in. Above them, unnoticed until now, the council drone whirred again. It had recorded everything. Across the galaxy, in the vaulted chamber where the decree had been made, the footage streamed live. Counselors sat frozen in disbelief as the beast once called Untamable obeyed a human's single word. Kane crouched, wiping blood from his knife, though none of it was his. He looked at the predator, voice quiet. You listened? Didn't think you'd do that. The beast tilted its head as though puzzled by his tone. Kane sat back exhausted. Guess we're in this together now. As night fell again, Kane set up a crude shelter against a ridge of stone. The predator settled nearby, a looming shadow against the firelight. It did not sleep, not really, but its storm eyes dimmed slightly, watching the dark beyond. Kane lay back, staring at the canopy. The council thought the predator untamable. The poachers thought it nothing but a prize. Kane thought neither had been paying attention. This wasn't about chains or cages. This was about choice. When his eyes finally closed, the last thing he heard was the predator shifting closer, the ground trembling faintly under its weight as if to guard his rest. The galaxy hadn't yet decided what to make of this impossible bond. But the bond itself had already been made. The council chamber burned with noise. The recording had gone viral across every corner of galactic space within hours, the image of a lone human halting the predator with a single word echoing in news feeds and military reports. Elders shrieked that it was a trick. Scholars demanded an explanation. Generals argued for immediate seizure of both human and beast before the bond could grow into something uncontrollable. Daniel Kane had no knowledge of the uproar, not yet. He was too busy surviving in the green labyrinth of K-47. The predator shadowed him as faithfully as a wolfhound, sometimes vanishing into the trees, sometimes reappearing so silently it was as if the jungle itself had spat it out again. Kane had given it a name now, spoken softly during a long night by the fire, Grey Fong. It was crude, maybe even foolish, but words gave shape to things, and Grey Fong felt less like a nightmare once it had a name. Kane tested the boundaries between them. He tried gestures, raising his hand flat to halt, lowering it slowly to bid calm. To his astonishment, the beast began to understand. When Kane lifted two fingers and pointed right, Grey Fong stalked in that direction. When Kane gave a short whistle, the spine titan returned to his side. Each small success sank deeper into Kane's mind. This wasn't blind instinct. It was comprehension. At the same time he felt the cost. The jungle was no less lethal because he had a companion. Razor-leaved vines cut his arms. Spore clouds forced him to mask his face. Strange insectal beasts hunted in coordinated packs, and Kane's rations dwindled fast. Grey Fong did not beg food from him. No, the predator hunted on its own, returning with kills large enough to share. At first, Kane recoiled at the bloody offerings, but hunger overcame pride, and soon the human and the monster were eating side by side. That intimacy changed something. Kane began speaking more, telling Grey Fong stories of Earth while stripping sinew from alien carcasses. He spoke of wolves tamed into dogs, of horses that carried men into war, of falcons that dived at their master's signal. He spoke of the stubbornness of humanity, the reckless will to build trust where logic said none could exist. The predator never answered, yet it listened, storm eyes steady on him, head tilting slightly at certain tones. Far away, the council studied the same moments through drone feeds, horrified and fascinated in equal measure. Impossible, snarled General Koth, mandibles grinding. No creature of that savagery can be domesticated. The human employs hidden technology. But others were less certain. Observe, murmured Scholar Eth, her tendrils swaying. The beast shows restraint, pattern recognition. It is not submission. It is choice. And it has chosen him. That idea spread like contagion, whispered through military outposts, across trade routes, through academies. If one human could bond with a predator, perhaps more could. If humans had this uncanny talent, what else might they tame? Cain remained oblivious until the sky burned. He had set up camp along a cliffside, Grey Fang coiled at the base while he sharpened a makeshift spear. The predator's ear spines twitched, head lifting sharply. Cain followed its gaze just in time to see streaks of fire cutting through the clouds. Dropships. He cursed under his breath, shoving his pack together. Council's not wasting time. The dropships descended with mechanical precision, their hulls marked with the Council's insignia. Out of them marched hunters, elite soldiers trained in xenobeast capture, their armor reflective, their weapons tuned to stun but powerful enough to level a fortress wall. Nets crackled with energy. Cages unfolded from gravlifts. Cain's stomach knotted. They weren't here for him. They were here for Grey Fang. He rose, planting himself between the beast and the advancing line. You don't want to do this, he called, voice carrying. You've seen the recordings. This isn't just some monster anymore. The lead hunter raised a gauntlet, broadcasting his reply. By order of the Galactic Council, the specimen is to be captured and delivered for study. Step aside, human. Do not interfere. Grey Fang rumbled low, the earth quivering beneath its chest. Cain could feel the beast's readiness to leap, to rend. He reached back without looking, laying his palm flat against the armored hide. Easy. Not yet. The hunters advanced, formation flawless. Cain's heart pounded. He knew their kind, men and women bred for efficiency like the special units he had once served beside back on Earth. They would not hesitate. They would not negotiate. But he also knew something they didn't. Grey Fang was more than a weapon. The predator had learned his voice, his signals, his trust. That bond might be the only thing standing between survival and slaughter. The first net fired, a glowing lattice of energy streaking toward them. Cain shouted a single command, sharp and clear, down. Grey Fang dropped flat against the ground, the net blazing harmlessly overhead to strike the cliff wall. Sparks flared, stone blackened. Cain raised his hand again, gesturing in a slicing motion. Grey Fang surged left, vanishing into the undergrowth. The hunters faltered. Their prey had not charged. It had obeyed. Cain stood alone before them, knife in one hand, makeshift spear in the other. He could feel Grey Fang circling unseen, waiting for his next cue. The hunters did not yet understand, but they would soon. This was not a battle between soldiers and beast. This was a test of trust, and Cain intended to prove the galaxy wrong. The predator once deemed untamable was no longer a wild fury. It was a partner. And together, man and monster were about to teach the Council what it meant to stand against a bond that could not be broken. The lead hunter raised his arm again, voice amplified, shaking slightly now. Restrain the beast. Take the human if you must. The forest grew silent, every leaf holding its breath. Cain clenched his jaw, raised his hand in signal, and whispered the word that would begin the storm. The forest erupted the moment Cain gave the signal. Grey Fang burst from the undergrowth like a living avalanche, its spines crackling as they sliced through air. The hunters barely had time to react before one of them was ripped off his feet, his net launcher crumpled like foil in the predator's jaws. Shouts in half a dozen alien tongues filled the clearing, commands tripping over panic. Cain didn't wait. He darted sideways, spear in hand, using every ounce of training he'd once used in deserts and cities back on Earth. These hunters were disciplined, but they weren't expecting a human to fight alongside the very beast they were ordered to subdue. He slid into the shadows of the trees, vanished from sight, and struck from behind. A knife flickered in his grip, severing a power cable on one of the heavy net guns. Sparks flared, the weapon went dead, and its wielder staggered in confusion just long enough for Grey Fang to barrel past and send the soldiers sprawling. Every move Cain made was mirrored by the predator's fury. Where he struck quick and small, Grey Fang struck massive and devastating. Where Cain distracted, Grey Fang finished. The hunters tried to adjust, forming a semicircle, their armor glinting with energy shields. Cain recognized the maneuver, locked down the target, closed the cage. It might have worked against a rampaging beast, but not against a predator that listened to command. Left flank. Kane barked, voice sharp. Gray Fang whipped around at once, jaws clamping down on the shield bearer anchoring that side. The alien screamed as the shield generator shattered, the formation collapsing. Kane swept in behind, slamming his spear but into another hunter's knee joint. Armor cracked. The soldier dropped. It wasn't just violence that unsettled the hunters. It was the sight of obedience. Again and again the predator hesitated at Kane's signal, holding back from killing blows, striking with precision rather than blind rage. Council doctrine had declared such restraint impossible. Yet here it was, man and monster not as captor and captive but as comrades. Still the hunters were not amateurs. One managed to fire a plasma bolt that scorched Gray Fang's flank. The predator roared, a sound so deep the trees quivered. Kane winced at the wound's glow then shouted, "Hold!" The beast froze mid-charge, eyes burning with fury but body still. Kane stepped in front of it, arms wide, daring the hunters to fire again. His voice cut through the standoff, raw and commanding. "You see it, don't you? It listens. Not because it's chained. Because it chooses to. You think you can cage that with steel?" For a moment even the hunters faltered. The leader raised his gauntlet again but his hands shook. He had seen what they all had, the predator waiting, obedient, restrained by nothing but a human's word. One of the younger hunters shouted in defiance and charged, energy blade humming. Kane shifted to meet him, knife ready, but Gray Fang moved faster. A paw slammed the alien into the dirt, pinning him without crushing. The predator growled low, vibrating the ground, but didn't strike the killing blow. Kane stepped close, crouching over the pinned soldier. He met the terrified eyes behind the visor. "You're alive because it chose to listen. Remember that." The pinned hunter was dragged back by his comrades, shaken and silent. The battle line wavered. No one advanced again. Above the treeline the council drone recorded every second, broadcasting across half the galaxy. Entire worlds watched in real time as the Untamable bowed to human command. In the chamber of the council the uproar grew unbearable. Accusations flew, trickery, witchcraft, genetic tampering, but none of them could erase what every being had just witnessed. Kane lowered his hand slowly, signaling Gray Fang to ease back. The predator obeyed, retreating a pace, though its eyes never left the hunters. Kane's chest heaved, adrenaline still singing in his blood. He knew this fight wasn't truly over. The council didn't give up because of one failed capture. They would escalate. They would send more. But for now he had won. The hunters gathered their wounded, their weapons scorched and broken, and retreated into the shadows of the jungle. Kane didn't follow. He simply stood with Gray Fang at his side, both bloodied, both breathing hard, both alive. The predator turned its massive head, storm eyes locking on him. Kane reached out, resting his palm against the rough hide. His voice was softer now, almost reverent. "We showed them." Gray Fang's chest rumbled with something between a growl and a purr. It wasn't affection as humans knew it, but it was something close. Kane sank onto a fallen trunk, wiping sweat from his brow. He knew the fight would echo far beyond this jungle. The council couldn't unsee what had just happened. They couldn't undo the proof that the apex predator had not only spared a human but fought alongside him. Above, the drone hovered one last moment, then zipped skyward toward orbit, its footage already a weapon sharper than any blade. Kane watched it vanish into the clouds, unease pressing against his ribs. "Guess they'll want answers," he muttered. Gray Fang shifted, settling beside him, massive body blocking half the firelight. Together they sat, man and monster, guardians of a truth the galaxy wasn't ready to accept. The council would call him dangerous. They would call the beast a threat. They would call the bond unnatural. Kane knew what they would never call it: trust. And trust, once forged, was not so easily broken. When the night closed in and silence returned, Kane leaned back against Gray Fang's side. He was exhausted, but sleep came anyway, comforted by the impossible knowledge that the most feared creature in the galaxy was keeping watch. Tomorrow would bring judgment. But tonight, man and predator breathed as one, waiting for the storm to come. The summons came at dawn, delivered through a shimmering holographic relay that flickered above Kane's campfire. The face of a council officer formed in the light, eyes cold, voice sharper than steel. "Daniel Kane of Earth. You and the creature are ordered to appear before the Galactic Council immediately. Your bond presents a galactic risk. Compliance is not optional." The projection cut out before Kane could respond. He looked at Gray Fang, who loomed just beyond the light. The predator's storm eyes reflected the fading hollow as if amused. Kane rubbed his jaw. "Guess they're done watching from the sidelines. The journey to the council world was a blur. Extraction ships came, bristling with weapons, but none dared fire. Kane walked aboard, Greyfang's bulk filling the corridors like an omen. No chains were attempted. No nets were raised. Every soldier who saw the beast lowered their eyes, afraid to test its patience. Kane stayed close to its side, knowing their silence was temporary. The true battle waited on the council floor. When the great chamber doors opened, the noise nearly staggered him. Representatives of 100 worlds filled the tiers, their voices overlapping in a storm of outrage, awe, and fear. At the center, beneath the vaulted dome of alloy and glass, Kane walked forward. Each step echoed, Greyfang's heavier strides shaking the floor like the steps of a living earthquake. The chamber fell silent when they reached the dais. The predator settled, not roaring, not lunging, but lowering its body beside Kane as if choosing stillness over violence. Its spines twitched faintly, but its eyes never left him. Counselor Verrill, scales gleaming under the chamber lights, rose to address him. "Human, you stand accused of endangering galactic security. The apex predator has slain hundreds, destroyed settlements, massacred our hunters. And yet you bring it here claiming control." His voice hardened. "Explain yourself before this council decides the fate of both you and the beast." Kane's throat was dry, but his voice came steady. "You call it untamable. You call it a threat. Maybe it is. But what you refuse to see is that it can also choose restraint. You've seen the recordings. Greyfang didn't obey because of chains or shock collars. It obeyed because it trusted me. That's something none of you tried. You went in with guns and cages. All I did was treat it like more than a monster." The chamber erupted again. Some shouted that humans use trickery. Others demanded proof that the predator's restraint wasn't coincidence. One general slammed a clawed hand onto the railing. "If it truly obeys, prove it here and now. Command it." Kane turned to Greyfang, who rumbled low, sensing the tension. "Stand," Kane said softly. The predator rose in one fluid motion, towering over the dais. Gasps filled the chamber. "Sit," Kane continued. Greyfang lowered itself with a thud that shook the chamber floor but did not crack it. The counselors leaned back, antennae twitching, tendrils curling, eyes wide. Never before had they seen obedience from the beast that had terrorized their sectors for centuries. One scholar spoke, voice trembling. "If humans can bond with predators such as this, then humanity is more dangerous than the predators themselves. If one man can achieve this, what happens if many try?" That fear spread through the chamber like fire. Whispers rose, some calling for Kane's execution, others for Earth's quarantine. Kane clenched his fists, meeting their eyes one by one. "You fear what you don't understand. You think taming is control. It isn't. It's trust. And trust works both ways. Greyfang could have killed me a dozen times. Instead it chose to stay. You call me dangerous? Fine. But understand this, humanity's danger isn't in weapons or numbers. It's in our ability to forge bonds where no one else can." Counselor Verrill hissed. "You expect us to let such a threat walk free? You and your pet could topple armies." Kane stepped closer, voice low but cutting through the silence. "Maybe. But armies would fall either way. The question isn't whether Greyfang can kill. It's whether it wants to. And right now it doesn't. Not because of you. Because of me." The chamber shuddered as a distant boom rattled the dome. Kane froze, instincts sharp. That was no atmospheric tremor. The alarms confirmed it. Sirens blared, crimson lights flashing. Outside the council hall, explosions echoed. The great doors shuddered as a blast rocked them open. Raiders poured in, mercenaries armed with plasma rifles, armor scarred, eyes burning with greed. Kane recognized them instantly. Poachers, scavengers who had followed the legend all the way here. They wanted Greyfang alive if possible, dead if not. Chaos erupted. Counselors scattered, guards tried to rally, but the raiders outnumbered them, weapons cutting arcs of fire through the chamber. Kane grabbed his knife, instincts snapping into place. Greyfang roared, the sound deafening, primal, enough to shatter glass and silence gunfire for a heartbeat. The predator launched forward, intercepting the raiders before they reached Kane. Armor crumpled under its weight, weapons shattered in its jaws. Kane moved with it, knife flashing, seizing dropped rifles, striking with precision. For every mercenary Greyfang tore apart, Kane took down another, their movements synchronized like two halves of the same blade. The chamber became a battlefield, screams echoing beneath the dome. Counselors huddled in fear, watching as the human they had condemned fought to protect them with the beast they had feared. Kane didn't waste words. Every motion was survival, every strike an answer to the council's doubt. At last, the last mercenary fell, Grey Fang's claws pinning him to the floor. Cain raised a hand. Hold. The predator froze, teeth inches from the raider's throat. Cain crouched beside the terrified man, ripped the rifle from his grip, and let him crawl away. Let him live, he said loudly enough for the council to hear. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of smoldering metal. Cain turned to the chamber, chest heaving, clothes torn and stained. Grey Fang stood beside him, bloodied but alive, spines bristling, eyes locked on him with something almost like pride. Cain raised his voice, raw but steady. You saw it? Not just obedience. Mercy. You feared a monster, but what you just witnessed is choice. If this predator, your so-called untamable horror, can learn trust, then maybe so can you. The counselors sat frozen, unable to deny what their own eyes had shown. Fear still lingered, but it was mingled now with something else. Respect. Perhaps even awe. Varel finally spoke, voice subdued, no longer triumphant. The decree of Untamable is revoked. The bond between this human and the predator stands as unique. But understand, Cain, your responsibility is great. Should this trust falter, it will be your world that bears the burden. Cain gave a small grim nod. Understood. But it won't falter. He laid his hand against Grey Fang's hide, feeling the steady rumble beneath. Not while we stand together. The chamber remained silent as he turned and walked away, predator at his side. No chains. No cages. Just a man and a beast who had chosen each other in defiance of the galaxy's fear. When the doors closed behind them, whispers filled the hall, but the legend had already begun. Stories would spread of the human who tamed the untamable, of the predator who bowed to no one but a man. Some would call it dangerous. Others would call it miraculous. But out in the vastness of space, as Cain returned to the frontier with Grey Fang at his side, only one truth mattered. The deadliest predator in the universe no longer slept alone. It slept beside a human loyal as kin, ready to face whatever storm the galaxy hurled next.